I'm Mr. Leonilo M. Esmilia, Teacher 2 from Esteban Madonna National High School. We are group number 1 and we are going to discuss to you topic 3, the foundation of curriculum. Now, what are the desired learning outcomes of our topic? Number 1, define what is philosophy, philosophical foundation, and curriculum. Second, describe the foundations of curriculum development. Third, compare and contrast the different philosophical beliefs. And fourth, explain how each foundation influences the curriculum development. Now, let us define what is philosophy. Philosophy comes from the Greek word philos and sophia, means love of wisdom. Second, it is the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence, especially when considered as an academic discipline. Philosophical, it is relating or devoted to the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence. It is characterized by the attitude of a philosopher. Foundation, it is an underlying basis or principle, and it is the basis upon which something stands or is supported. Curriculum, the subjects comprising a course of study in a school or college. Also, it is a standards-based sequence of planned experiences where students practice and achieve proficiency in content and applied learning skills. But according to our mentor, the best definition of curriculum is according to Palma. There are 4 major foundations of curriculum: philosophical, historical, psychological, and social. Okay, let's move on to the introduction of philosophical foundation. Our curriculum today stands in a very strong foundation. It was started by our Lord Jesus Christ, the greatest teachers of all times. Curriculum development is anchored in a very solid foundation. Although considered as a new curriculum or a new discipline, its significance in the light of global development has now been acknowledged. Educators, teachers, educational planners, and policy makers must have a philosophy or a strong belief about education and schooling and the kind of curriculum in the teacher's classroom or learning environment. Philosophy of the curriculum answers questions like what are the schools for, what subjects are important, how should students learn, what method should be used, what outcomes should be achieved, and why.
Good day everyone, I'm Lorraine Magramo, your presenter, and my topic is all about philosophical foundation. Start with the 4 educational philosophies: perennialism, essentialism, progressivism, and reconstructivism. Let's start with perennialism. The aim of perennialism is to educate the rational person, to cultivate the intellect and moral qualities. The classroom and perennialism are centered on teachers. They emphasize that a student should not be taught information that soon be outdated or found to be incorrect. Perennialism, teachers help think with reason. It focuses on classical subject, literary analysis, and curriculum content. The use of great books is emphasized. Let's proceed to the perennialist philosopher. First is Plato. He lays the foundation of Western philosophy. He was a mathematician, writer of philosophical dialogues, founder of Academy in Athens, and for him, spiritual is more real than physical. Next philosopher is Aristotle. He addressed the question of how people should live. He felt people should pursue golden mean, a moderate course between extremes. What is a golden mean? It is your character finding a balance to act morally. Aristotle left behind many writings which became the basis for later educational system in Europe. He was the tutor of Alexander the Great. Next is Thomas Aquinas, an immensely influential philosopher, theologian, and jurist in the tradition of scholasticism. He was the foremost classical proponent of natural theology and the father of Thomism, of which he argued that reason is found in God. Okay, next is essentialism. Essentialism believed that children should learn traditional basic subjects thoroughly. It means that every children must learn the most necessary, substantial, basic things that can use in their everyday lives. Essentialism focuses on the excellence in education, back to basics, and cultural literacy. Essentialist philosopher William Bagley. He was referred to as the founder of essentialist educational theory. A great philosopher of education, he believed that the major role of the school was to mold students into a literate and intelligent person. And that is the end of my report. I'm Lorraine Magramo once again from Esteban Madrona National High School saying thank you and welcome to our next reporter.
Hey everyone, I'm Nenya Lawrence F. Solano from Esteban Madrona National High School, and my report is all about the continuation of Ma'am Lorraine's report. Progressivism. Its aim of education is to promote democratic and social living. Progressivism's role of education is knowledge leads to growth and development of lifelong learners who actively learn by doing. Progressivism's focus on curriculum. Subjects are interdisciplinary, integrative, and interactive. Curriculum is focused on students' interests, human problems, and affairs. Progressivism's curriculum trends. School reforms, relevant and contextualized curriculum, and humanistic education. So let's move on to John Dewey. He's the founder of the philosophical movement known as pragmatism, a pioneer in functional psychology, and a leader of the progressive movement in education in the United States. He was born on October 20, 1859, in Burlington, Vermont, U.S., and died on June 1, 1952, in New York, New York. John Dewey is an American philosopher, psychologist, and educational reformer whose ideas have been influential in education and social reform. He was one of the most prominent American scholars in the first half of the 20th century. Reconstructionism's aim of education. This aims to improve and reconstruct society. This emphasizes the addressing of social questions and a quest to create a better society and worldwide democracy. Reconstructionism's focus in curriculum. It focuses on present and future trends and issues of national and international interest. Let's talk about Theodore Brameld. He was a leading educational philosopher of the 20th century, and as an American educator and philosopher, Brameld was best known as the founder of social reconstructionism. He was born on January 20, 1904 in U.S. and died on October 1987 in Durham, North Carolina, U.S. That ends my report, and once again, I'm Nenya Lawrence F. Solano from Esteban Madrona National High School, saying thank you and God bless.
Good day, everyone. I am Eleanor Bansi Mirano from Santo Niño National High School, and I will be reporting about psychological foundation of curriculum. but I was just assigned to deliver only the first topic, which is about behaviorism or association theory. What is psychology? Psychology is the scientific study of mental functions and behavior, including perception, cognition, behavior, emotion, personality, and interpersonal relationships. Psychology is derived from the Greek word psyche, which means soul. It is a discipline devoted to the study of behavior, mind, and thought. It deals with the study of mental processes that determines a person's behavior and thinking. Basis to understand the teaching and learning process. It unifies elements of the learning process. So when applied to teaching and learning, it provides understanding how students learn and understand a body of knowledge. So the curriculum developers need to know how students learn and take into consideration individual differences when designing a curriculum. Why? So that they can incorporate psychological principles when they design, develop, and implement curriculum. Theories of learning have been classified into three groups, and these are behaviorism or association theory, cognitive information processing theory, and humanistic theory. Theories agree. Psychology provides insight into understanding the teaching and learning process. What is learning? Why do learners respond as they do teachers' efforts? What impact does the school and culture have on students' learning? Psychology theories also provide principles and direction for curriculum developer. How should curriculum be organized to enhance learning? What is the optimal level of student participation in learning the curriculum's various contents? Behaviorism or association theory. So it focuses on stimulus, response, and reinforcers. Studies conditioning, modifying, or shaping behavior through reinforcement and rewards. Education in the 20th century was dominated by behaviorism. The mastery of the subject matter is given more emphasis. Proponent in behaviorism is Ivan Pavlov. He was born on 1849 and died on 1936. Pavlov is the father of classical conditioning theory, or the SR theory, or the stimulus response theory. Stimulus generalization, extension, spontaneous recovery, discrimination, and higher order conditioning. He showed that an organism can associate a particular stimulus with a particular response. So stimulus is equal to response. So therefore, learning is the result of an association formed between a stimulus and a response. Pavlov's experiment with salivating dogs best demonstrated the principle of classical conditioning. Dogs were trained to salivate at the sound of a bell. Dogs naturally salivated with food, that is the unconditioned response. A bell, which is the neutral stimuli, was rung every time the dogs were fed over a period of time, creating the association or connection of the bell with food. After time, the dog salivated at the sound of the bell alone. Key to learning is, early years of life is to train them what you want them to become. SR theory, or the stimulus response theory, is a foundation of learning practice called indoctrination. Proponent of behaviorism theory is Edward Thorndike. He was born in 1874 and died on 1949. Edward Thorndike is the father of modern educational psychology and founder of behavioral psychology. He started his research with animals using stimulus and response, or the classic conditioning, and developed the idea of connectionism. In 1928, Thorndike conducted his first major study with adults. Edward Thorndike championed the connectionism theory. Connectionism defined learning as a connection or association of an increasing number of habits. More complicated associations means higher levels of understanding. he proposed the three laws of learning: law of readiness, law of exercise, and law of effect. A specific stimulus has a specific response. Thorndike maintained that conditions influence behavior. Attitudes and ability can improve over time. Instruction can be designed and controlled. It is important to select stimuli and experiences that are integrated consistently and reinforce connections. Okay, let us now discuss the three laws of learning. The first law is the law of readiness, often misinterpreted as educational readiness. Deals with attitudes and focus. Why should I do this? So if nervous system is ready, conduction is satisfying, and lack of conduction is annoying. Law of readiness also states that certain behaviors are more likely to be learned than others because the nervous system of the organism is ready to make the connection, leading to a satisfying state of affairs. Example, if the teacher says, "Okay, we will now watch the movie you've been waiting for," and suddenly the power goes off, the students will feel frustrated because they were ready to respond to the stimulus but was prevented from doing so. The second law is the law of exercise. It states that connections between stimulus and response is strengthened when practiced and weakened when practice is discontinued. And the third law is the law of effect. If a response is followed by a pleasurable or rewarding experience, the response will be strengthened and become habitual. Thorndike's influence. Thorndike and other followers believe that rote memorization does not necessarily strengthen connections. There has to be some sort of meaning associated with it in order to be transferred to other situations. Thorndike broke the traditional thinking about hierarchy of subject matter. One subject was no more important to meaningful learning than another. Until then, math and science were seen as more important to teaching structure. The third and last proponent of behaviorism theory is Robert Gain. He was born on 1916 and died on 2002. Robert Gain proposed the hierarchical learning theory. Learning follows a hierarchy. Behavior is based on prerequisite conditions. Also, he introduced tasking in the formulation of objectives. Gain's hierarchy of learning. In 1956, Robert Gain proposed a system of classifying different types of learning in terms of the degree of complexity of the mental processes involved. He identified 8 basic types and arranged these. According to him, the higher orders of learning in this hierarchy build upon the lower levels, requiring progressively greater amounts of previous learning for their success. The lowest 4 orders tend to focus on the more behavioral aspects of learning, while the highest 4 aspects of learning focus on the more cognitive aspects. Number 1 is signal learning, the simplest form of learning, and consists essentially of the classical conditioning first described by the behavioral psychologist Pavlov. Number 2, stimulus-response learning, a sophisticated form of learning. Number 3, chaining is an advanced form of learning in which the subject develops the ability to connect 2 or more previously learned stimulus response bands into linked sequence. Number 4, verbal association, a form of chaining in which the links between the items being connected are verbal in nature. And number 5, discrimination learning, the ability to make appropriate responses to a series of similar stimuli that differ in a systematic way. Number 6, concept learning, the ability to make a consistent response to different stimuli that form a common class or category of some sort. Number 7, rule learning, a very high-level cognitive process that involves being able to earn relationships between concepts and apply these relationships in different situations. And the last, number 8, problem solving, the highest level of cognitive process according to Gain. So let us summarize the Gain's hierarchy of learning. Number 1, signal learning. Number 2, stimulus-response learning. Number 3, chaining. Number 4, verbal association. Number 5, discrimination learning. Number 6, concept learning. Number 7, rule learning. And number 8 is problem solving. According to Robert Gain, there are 5 learning outcomes: observable and measurable. Number 1 is intellectual skill. Create individual competence and ability to respond to stimuli. Number 2 is verbal information. Rote memorization of names, phrases, days, phone numbers, etc. Number 3, cognitive strategies. Capability to learn, think, and remember. And number 4, motor skills. For example is the capability to learn to drive, ride a bike, draw a straight line, etc. And number 5, attitudes. Approach to ideas, people, or situations that affects how one acts towards these things. These are the feelings and emotions from positive and negative experiences.
Good day everyone, I am Joy M. Molo from Santo Niño National High School, and I will be reporting the cognitive and humanistic theory of psychological foundation of curriculum. It is the continuation of Ma'am Eleanor B. Mirano's report. I know that you already have a background knowledge about the topic, but allow me to recall significant details and informations about this one. I hope you're learning something from my topic or report. Alright, let's start. The cognitive information processing theory, from the word cognitive, it involves intellectual activities such as thinking, reasoning, or remembering. Cognitivist jurist focuses on how individuals process information, monitor and manage thinking skills. Cognitivists emphasize that learning is cognitive in nature. Also, growth and development changes in the structure and function of human characteristics. Jean Piaget, 1896-1980. He proposed the cognitive development theory, which concerned with cognitive. Cognitive means the thinking ability or the reasoning skills of an individual. Piaget introduced the cognitive development theory, which consists of sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete, and formal operations. He also suggests the key learning or the keys to learning, which is assimilation, accommodation, and equilibration or equilibrium. Cognitive development stages described as hierarchical. Hierarchical in a sense that learning involves assimilation, accommodation, which the schema theory explains importance of accessing prior knowledge and why cognitive dissonance strategies work. Next is Lev Vygotsky, one of the founders of constructivism. He is a Russian psychologist which proposed that culture requires skilled tool used, which is the language, art, and counting systems. Okay, Lev Vygotsky, 1896 to 1934, the sociocultural development theory. Next is scaffolding, the more knowledgeable other, and what we call the ZPD or the zone of proximal development. And lastly but not the least is Howard Gardner, who introduced the multiple intelligence, which Each individual is unique and they have different talents or skills that they possess. Now let's discuss the different multiple intelligences. We have the visual spatial intelligence, we have the verbal linguistic, mathematical, logical, bodily kinesthetic. These are 9 intelligences. But first, I will introduce to you the first 4 intelligences which appears on the screen, which is the learning visually and organizing ideas spatially, which is the visual spatial, and then the verbal linguistic, which is learning through spoken and written words, and then the mathematical logical, which is learning through reasoning and problem solving, and the bodily kinesthetic, that is learning through interaction in one's environment. Daniel Goleman, he proposed the emotional quotient. Okay, let's discuss the different characteristics of emotional quotient of Daniel Goleman. We have the self-awareness, the self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. What is self-awareness? They understand the emotions, and these emotions, they don't let their feelings rule them. The self-regulation, these people regulate typically and don't allow themselves to become too angry or jealous. And then the motivation, which is willing to defer immediate for long-term success. So empathy, this is around the ability to identify with and understand the wants, needs, and viewpoints of people around you. And this is not go along with selfishness, because selfish people doesn't have an empathy to other people. So this is the opposite of selfishness. Am I right or wrong? So it's up to you. And then social skills, those with strong social skills are typically team players rather than focuses on their own success. This theory, humanistic theory, is concerned with development of human potential. In this theory, curriculum is after the process and not the product, and focuses on personal needs and not on the subject matter, and clarifying psychological meanings and environmental situations. So we have the Gestalt psychology. This is proposed by Max Wertheimer, Wolfgang Kohler, and Kurt Kafka. So in Gestalt, they have the closure, proximity, continuation, and figure and ground, and then similarity. According to Gestalt theory, learning is explained in terms of wholeness of the problem. Human beings do not respond to isolated stimuli, but an organization or pattern of stimuli. What is law of proximity? Proximity means nearness. Elements that are closer together will be perceived as a coherent subject. Next is the law of similarity. Elements that look similar will be perceived as a part of the same form. Closure. We tend to fill the gaps or close the figures we perceive. We enclose a space by completing a contour and ignoring gaps in the figure. So, as you can see in the picture, it is a giraffe. But as you can see, if this is not closed, you will not identify that this is a giraffe. Next is the law of continuation, that individuals have the tendency to continue contours whenever the elements of the pattern establish an implied direction. People tend to draw a good continuous line. So it refers also, or it resembles in our life. Then the law of figure or ground, we tend to pay attention and perceive things in the foreground first. A stimulus will be perceived as separate from its ground. As you can see in the picture, that this can be seen on the ground. So things will perceived as different and separate from the ground itself. Next is Abraham Maslow. In 1908 and 1970, the self-actualization of Abraham Maslow theory and classic theory of human needs. He out importance to human emotions based on love and trust. And according to him, there are keys of learning that produce a healthy and happy learner who can accomplish, grow, and actualize his or her human self. According to Carl Rogers, non-directive teaching model established counseling procedures and methods for facilitating learning. According to him, the keys to learning is the curriculum is concerned with the process and not the product, the personal needs and not the subject matter, and the psychological meaning and not the cognitive scores. According to Carl Rogers, there are 5 distinct phases in non-directive teaching and student-teacher interview, which has phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4, and phase 5. According to Carl Rogers, in phase 1, the teacher encourages the students to express their feelings freely. And in phase 2, the student defines the problem while the teacher helps to clarify the student's feelings. And in phase 3, the student discusses the problem with the teacher and develops insight. Phase 4, the student plans decision making and the teacher clarifies their plans. And phase 5, the student develops more positive actions after gaining further insights.